climate and mutation. This is Talbot Heath, leading to Bourne Bottom, which is as good an English name as you'll hear. It's not far from where I live, and it's a stone's throw from where I once went to art college many hundreds of earth years ago. AUB, Arts University, Bournemouth, and Bournemouth University, just over that hill, adjacent to this interesting environment. And this interesting environment is quite rare. It's lowland heath, and there's not much of that left anywhere in the world. In fact, of all the lowland heath anywhere on earth, keep up, this is interesting, 20% of it is in the UK. And an awful lot of that is right here, where I am. So it's special. It's so special that it's protected. Yes, the sentinels that stand guard include some very boring sounding acronyms like triple SIs and SAPs. And the EC directive on habitat declares it must be looked after and protected, so local councils and others can't build what they like on it. It's characterised by kind of gorse and low heathers and a delicate ecosystem of creatures that like to live in this kind of sandy, lower nutrient environment. I hope you're writing all this down. Things like the sand lizard and the nightjar sings here, and the excellently named green tiger beetle, as well as rare creatures like the adder. It is a delicate eco-balance, and people have to look after it. But you might say, because you're really on the ball about such things, if the environment's changed so much, because this is an environment that was originally formed by the way human beings used it, I believe the phrase is low impact human activity, if that's changed so much that most of it's gone, why bother hanging on to the rest? Well, I would say, why bother hanging on to most of our heritage? A lot of it doesn't have practical use, you might say. And that includes most of England. Because as the writer Bill Bryson once said affectionately, all of England is basically a garden. It's a garden shaped by centuries of particular agricultural behaviours, farming. And that is now its own ecosystem of hedgerows and low walls and fields that roll and undulate because of the way we've dealt with them. And a lot of it isn't working as hard agriculturally as it used to. But you know what? It represents something in our identity as little old Englanders, doesn't it? British people. So we do our best to protect it. And that's why this is being protected. A responsibility to the wildlife and to the fact that local people kind of love it. In the great referendum debate of the summer of 2016, of which all British people, just like me, are rightly proud and uplifted, being as it has been, at best a farce, at worst dark. We're basically, as the British electorate, being asked to choose between two factions of the establishment. A bunch of unelected, opaque Eurocrats, European overlords on the one hand, and a government even more right-wing and heavily mandated than the most right-wing government we've had in modern times in Britain. Which of those do you think has our best interests at heart? We're also being asked to choose between two different catastrophes, between slipping over the abyss on the one hand, dragged over there by Europe, or being cast adrift and atomised even potentially if we leave. It's not exactly uplifting, is it? Thing is, I think the exiteers are having a slightly better time of it in some ways in constructing a simpler, positive message. Because they can say, you keep telling us we can't do it. Are you sick of feeling disempowered? We've had enough of just sitting around with a stagnated economy, tied to the most stagnated economic union anywhere in Earth. And people say we're little Englanders for doing it, and we can't do it, and we're weak. But we're the world's 5th largest economy, for God's sake. We sit at the table of kings, we can do it. You see, it's very easy, isn't it? It's very easy to construct this. I'm quite excited now. Whereas the Remain camp have to say, we are in the middle of a multi-generational project, and sometimes they will go a bit awry, and sometimes, it'll go a few blind alleys. It is actually quite complicated, but bear with us because it's better. Oh, goodness me. Bear with us because it's better. It's not easy to articulate that well, is it? And who are you really going to vote for? They're all establishment figures at the top. The thing is, the EU isn't all good or all bad. It's just not that simple, is it? Take the Common Agricultural Policy. Please, take the Common Agricultural Policy, about which I know very little indeed. In some ways, it's seen as a typical Eurocrat sort of thing, in that it demands certain quotas being made so that we end up making far too much food, and there are actual mountains of food waste. And the money that gets paid regularly doesn't actually even reach the common farmer very easily, because it goes to great big food producers like Nestle, who take a bung every month. Thank you very much. Why can't we just free all that up and get cheaper food from elsewhere and free it all up and see what happens? On the other hand, the CAP ensures that Europe has food on its plate consistently, and better quality food. There are quality standards, and more diverse, interesting food, because it also looks after certain specialised food interests. It's not all good and it's not all bad. But I think we need something that works at the level of the EU specifically. A sacred text to the study of urban design, which is the privilege of my lovely wife, the lovely First Lady of Momo, is a book written in the 50s by a woman, and an unqualified woman, who rather upset the apple cart in planning architectural terms back in the 50s, because she used the witchcraft of her own eyes to just watch what happens on streets and write it down. She came up with the idea, she being Jane Jacobs, writing in the Rise and Fall and Rise of Great American Cities, about the idea of eyes on streets. The more eyes you naturally, culturally have on the same space at all hours of the day without trying, the safer it will be, the more owned that space will be. And she also wrote about the networks of communities that we need in different mixes to have a healthy community. She cited talking to the butcher, for example, having a relationship up to a point with him or any other local shopkeeper so that you recognise each other and you can say a nice hello whenever you go in, to just enough extent that you can ask, just occasionally, for them to keep an eye on your bike while you nip next door to the baker's, and they'd be happy to. But you're not expected to go to his son's bar mitzvah or his granny's funeral. And that works. Well, I think that, as with so many things in our daily personal lives, is very similar to how it works at the diplomatic level. We need different networks of friendships to work in different ways. We need the super local level so that people here kind of own their backyard and care enough about Talbot Heath to keep an eye on it with the council and lean on them a bit in case there's development or whatever, and they own it. And then you need things at the town level to look at all the different communities locally and see how they feed together. And the same with the national level, and the same with the international level. But I think we really need another, and now more than ever. It's that local international level. Because the truly international level's blooming unwieldy. Think about it, San Marino is a sovereign state, or Luxembourg. So is the United States of America. And the US is more akin to the whole of Europe, isn't it? The real challenge for us now is not Europe. It's the establishment as it is. It's the system as it is. It's how to find wealth for everyone and everyone find their voice. Free to be whoever they want to be. That's the real challenge. You want to sort out a migrant crisis? Get everybody what they need. Get everybody the freedom to choose their identity so that we can choose to stand with each other in different mixes and different flows. Who's going to stand up against the titans of industry who have monopolies? The big food producers or the big oil producers? Because if there is one pressing thing ahead of us right now, it is environment. When you add climate change to an ageing population and a growing population, you've got a brewing crisis happening now, and that our children are going to have to deal with kind of beyond all understanding if we don't act now. That ain't fear, that's pragmatic fact. You plan for every eventuality. who is leading the charge in tackling BP and Shell and all the others and the whole culture of oil that we've all grown so dependent on? It's the bloc of the EU. Over the last 5 years, the top 10 of countries that are doing the best to bring their emissions targets, meet their emissions targets and bring down their emissions and also develop renewable energy, top 10 have almost always been European, and most of those in the EU. It's the EU that can go toe-to-toe with these big super tankers and make them change. Take that out of the mix, and what have you got? And here's the truth. If we go for Brexit now and pull down the common market, which is all but the stated aim of a lot of, interestingly, people at the top, that ain't half going to pull the power out of everybody's will and time and energies to deal with climate change. It's going to depower that for 10 years. It just is. We can't afford to lose another 10 years on this. The EU is often described as protectionist. And good Lord knows that the quangos and the other things that are so wrong with it give me the heebies. And I have to say, this whole process has made me fall not out of love with the EU, because I wasn't exactly in love with it, but I like it less. I like it less. But I also think it points forward. It creates a climate for conversations, potentially, that's better. Because that's the truth of a Brexit now, that Brexiteers never want to talk about. What will the diplomatic climate be on the other side of leaving? It'll be an acrimonious divorce is what it'll be. Do you really think that everything's going to be sorted out quickly when we've told them all to that? It's not humanly real, is it? The human scale is the diplomatic scale in some things. We have to contend with that and stand with our neighbourhood, in my opinion. And that's why I'm voting in. Because I think we will destabilise things far more and send a signal into the climate of conversations around the world at a time when we need to be working together. We'll be saying, go for your own. That desire to address an unaddressed injustice in the British heart at the moment is a kind of truth that will get lost on the other side of the vote. That the people we're voting for won't address in the end. It won't do a single thing to address immigration or those fears. It will dent the economy in the short term. And there are no promises of how it will create a whole nirvana of new markets in the future. That's last century's dream. Brand new markets opening up. They were worried about that in the 19th century, about the markets closing off because they were running out of places to nick and how to fund them. But here's the thing. We do live in unprecedented times. Times where we get to influence the climate of conversation like ordinary idiots like you and me have never done before, because we are connected. At work, at home, we are connected through networks like no one's been, that we couldn't have dreamt of in the past very easily. And that means we know stuff, and that means we affect things. That means we might just be able to affect nature's great trick to changing and evolving. Mutation. The big companies like BP have, or the big advertising agencies like OGMA, they have incubator projects in them to experiment with new ways of doing things. And they feel they have to do this not simply to try and get a march on their rivals, but also because of brand, the impression of them in their customers' minds. It matters enough that they invest some money in looking like they're doing the right thing. That's a very cynical way of putting it, but you can, even at that level, it makes some sense why they do it. They have these projects looking at how to create greener fuel or technology for the future. And let's not forget BP rebranded to have a conspicuously green logo with the words Beyond Petroleum underneath. So they want to be seen to be doing the right thing. But how do the good souls in the middle of these behemoths steer the supertanker? The climate we create in the way we talk to them and deal with them can change the more we add to it. And the more they'll need to go to those little incubator, lean testbed projects and get more out of them, until you reach a moment of singularity, where a mutation pops up above the surface. And before you know it, BP is a company that might be doing more to help power our homes safely in a sustainable way. At the moment, it and others really aren't. And we have to change that culture. And I think it's only the starting point to put pressure on them before mutation can even happen, to hold them back and push them forward when they currently don't want to, is the EU. I want to see spontaneous mutation on our planet between you and me. I want to see refugees have homes. I want to see hypocrite me be some kind of useful in the future. And I want to see you fighting the corner of the world that you have to deal with, dealing with the amount of or lack of or access to or not access to cultural capital that you happen to have randomly. Whatever the coalface is you're at, I want us to be able to actualise ourselves. And that's the real challenge of right now, is coming to terms with who and what we really are as a species. That's the real challenge, not Europe, not immigration. It's being okay with what we all are collectively. That's why transgenderism and sexual issues are on the news all the time. It's not some crazy new fad. It's dealing with what we always were, as so many other things are. Terrorism and other hideous things are part of that. Human beings trying to throw off old hierarchies through old fears. That's what this is all about. And that's why I want to vote, in this particular instance, for the lesser of two evils that I think sends a statement to the world. We need to work together. We need to create a climate where change is really possible. And I don't think the super shock to the system that will upset the balance of everything so dramatically is the way to do it. Tempting though it is, and I do feel it. Nature has a delicate balance in things. And some things need protecting that the market just wouldn't even see, never mind put a value on. Because they're things that make us human and make our communities truly valuable. Tomorrow I am voting in